Hello and welcome. My name is Kristen Fairweather, and I'm a member of the Alliance of Women Directors, and we're so thrilled to be hosting this conversation with Jamie Babbit. Jamie's nominated for an Emmy this year for Outstanding Directing for a Comedy Series for her work in Only Murders in the Building. Only Murders in the Building, which received 17 Emmy nods this year, stars Steve Martin, Martin Short, and Selena Gomez as amateur sleuths who bond over their shared love of true crime and set out to solve the mystery of their neighbor's death. The show mixes mystery and physical comedy and suspense and does it all with emotional stakes and heart. The show is created by Steve Martin and John Hoffman. Jamie directed the pilot and several other episodes and serves as executive producer. In addition to Only Murders in the Building, Jamie's directed several features and produced and directed multiple award-winning TV shows. Her television credits include A League of Their Own, The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, Russian Doll, and Silicon Valley, which she received a Best Comedy Directing Emmy nod for. Her debut film, which I'm very excited to talk about because it's one of my personal favorites, is But I'm a Cheerleader. It was nominated as one of the top 20 best romantic comedies of all time from The Independent, and of course is a much beloved cult classic. So it's my pleasure to welcome you, Jamie, and congratulate you on your second Emmy nod and the 17 nods for the show. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, it's very exciting.
Yeah, very cool. And I tried to channel my inner Mabel. I didn't have any yellow to wear, but I was like, all right, I'll get some yellow flowers and a sweater vest. And I was like asking my daughters this morning, I was like, do you have any gold hoops? Yeah. So let's talk about your episode that you're nominated for an Emmy, True Crime, from Only Murders in the Building. You also directed 4 out of 10 of the episodes in season 1. You're nominated for that pilot episode. And, you know, I know there's been a lot of written about the title sequence, but it's so special because I think once you see that sequence, you can just tell that the creative team has put so much love into the show. You know, I think it's just such a love letter to New York, but also to mystery and suspense and physical comedy, and also just like older and younger generations and where we actually overlap. So I'm curious to know how you became involved and how the collaboration with John Hoffman and Steve Martin went.
Yeah. So basically, after I worked on Girls for HBO, my kind of first HBO job, I got my second HBO job was on a show called Looking, which was also a gay TV show set in San Francisco. And it was John Hoffman was the writer of my episode. And so we worked together on Looking, and we had a fabulous time collaborating. And I just had a great time working on that show. And so they kept hiring me to direct more and more episodes on Looking. And John and I stayed in touch and became friends. And so during the pandemic, so this would be 2020, John called me and said, hey, I'm attached to this Steve Martin thing. Is it something that you might be interested in directing on? And I said, yeah, I would definitely be interested. And he was like, okay, well, I'll keep that in mind because we're looking for people. So I said, great. And I said, you know, I actually just directed this pilot because, you know, as everyone knows in TV, the best thing to do is to direct pilots. They're much more lucrative than regular television because you actually get like a piece of the show as it moves on. And it's just like a big deal financially to direct the first episode. And it's really been limited for women. Like when I started my career, it was like no women got to direct pilots. So finally, I had gotten a job directing the pilot for League of Their Own, which was a lesbian kind of retelling of the League of Their Own story through like a gay, queer lens. And so I had already directed that pilot. So I said to John, you know, hey, I just directed the pilot of League of Their Own. And he's like, oh, you did? Well, maybe you could direct the pilot of Only Murders, because it's always hard to get your first one, but once you have one, it's easier. So he said, do you think that Amazon would let us watch the pilot and then I could try to convince them to hire you as the pilot director? And I was like, yeah, that would be amazing. So basically I had an interview with Dan Fogelman, who I did not know, was the executive producer of Only Murders, who created This Is Us. And he had originally wanted the directors who directed the pilot for This Is Us to do the pilot for Only Murders. And John, who, was the writer, he was like, hey, Dan, I'd really like to work with Jamie. Can we watch her pilot for League of Their Own? And if we like it, do you think we would consider her? So anyway, they loved the pilot for League of Their Own. And so he was like, great, we actually want to hire you to do the pilot, which was awesome.
Yeah.
So I went to New York, and I was so excited because I'd worked with John before, and I just know what a love he is. He's so smart. We had such a great rapport. He's so funny. And it was just like really nice to work with a friend.
Yeah.
And so I was really, my whole goal was, I love John's writing. He's very funny and he has heart, and he also has like a magical realism that he's interested in, like kind of pushing the boundaries of sitcoms into something really interesting. And also, we're both from the Midwest. Like, there's something, and that was true with But I'm a Cheerleader too, where people were like, it's like John Waters. And I'm like, it is like John Waters, but there's like a kindness and a like love story to But I'm a Cheerleader, which is not a like bitchy view of the world.
Yeah.
It's like there's like a kind center to it, and I feel like John has that writing also, where it's funny but it's not mean spirited. It's like there's like a loving center to it. So I really wanted to make that a part of the tone, and then keep it emotional. It could be funny, but that it also has like real people. And then I said to John early on, I was like, the person who's kind of co-opted the New York murder mystery is Woody Allen. Which, as a filmmaker, obviously he's so talented and I love a lot of his films, but I also think he's a creepy pedophile, and you see it in the films. Like, there's just a creepy, gross, when you're a woman and you, especially a young woman watching those movies, you're like, wow, Manhattan is a good movie, but ew, gross. Like, and there's just this like really creepy energy to all these like women, first of all, that he's their boyfriend, and also that he's always hitting on young, there's just always that creepy element of his movies, which I do not relate to and I don't like. So I was like, I think we have to do a Manhattan murder mystery that is not the Woody Allen version, that has like goodness and not creeps, and like and these older men that are not like going after these young women. That there is this like father-daughter vibe with Selena, and how can we take the genre back from Woody Allen, basically? And then what can we do to make it different and make it feel like it's our version of Manhattan? And so we looked around at a lot of different buildings, which building to pick. And Nora Ephron had written this wonderful New Yorker article all about the building that she loved in New York when she got divorced, and she moved into that building on the Upper West Side. So we were actually looking at that building, and we were having a hard time getting permission to shoot there. And across the street from that building is the building that we ended up with.
Oh, it's so perfect.
It's so perfect. It's so perfect. And that building has like a really funny history, but it is beautiful now. It was renovated by Bob Stern a number of years ago. And during COVID, all the very wealthy people who live there, who would normally say no to a film company shooting, and they actually never let films shoot there, they were all at their homes in the Hamptons in Connecticut and whatever during the pandemic. So they actually let us shoot in their courtyard because no one was in town, because no one was in New York. New York was empty. It was during the pandemic. So that was the only way that we got to shoot in there, because no one was, I mean, very few people were living in that apartment building. And so they let us go in the courtyard. So that was awesome. And then with Steve and Marty, they're best friends. They are kind, wonderful, warm, generous, not Woody Allen creepos. And Selena is also just such a love, wonderful, kind, So
Yeah.
I felt like I was working with like the nicest, kindest group of 3 actors, and then John Hoffman, who's just so wonderful. So it was like a dream job. Um, and honestly, we got to shoot at all of those amazing New York locations, because I've been working in New York as a director on Russian Doll, Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, and I never really got to shoot in a lot and on Girls. A lot of locations were off limits to us because there's so much filming in New York that they're like sick of you, and they tell you a million rules that you can't shoot here, you can't shoot here, you can't shoot here. But during the pandemic, we were one of the few shows that was shooting in New York, and they
Right.
were so desperate. So everyone said yes, and we could shoot anywhere we wanted.
It's so cool. And you can tell, I mean, you feel it. It feels so expansive, and all those shots in the courtyard, even when Jan's playing like her sexy bassoon. It's so like, I love it. Just felt so, I'm from the East Coast, and it really made me feel so like homesick in the best way. I mean, even one of my favorite scenes I forget if it's the last, yeah, it must be the last episode that you directed of season 1, where Charles is poisoned and he's going down in the elevator, and 2 of the women get in when he's like laying on the ground immobile. It's so New York, but it's also like funny and loving, where they're just like, oh God, of course he's here. You know? It's just such a great, even with, I'm really happy that you mentioned kind of that nice aspect and like the loving aspect in New York, because it is such a gritty city, and also like the Woody Allen kind of leering, because I think the other things that you guys gave a lot of love to were like true crime fans and podcasts, and even like the miscommunication with the older and younger generations as they come together. You poke fun at it, but you still are like caring about the people who are playing these roles and these characters, and so you're not mocking them. So we're on the ride with them in such a way that's just really fun and refreshing.
Yeah, and everyone like really cares about each other. So even though Marty's like has no money, and he's borrowing money from his son, and and Steve Martin is kind of like a loser actor who wishes that he had the fame that he once had, and Selena is kind of sad and living in this weird empty apartment. Like there is like a loving energy between all 3 of them, where they find this connection, and it's through true crime and through their shared interest and just being bored and finding something to do. So that's really a tribute to John's energy, Steve's energy. Like they're just both very kind, wonderful human beings who are true crime people, and nerdy and excited to do little whodunits, and we also sometimes talked about it being like Nancy Drew. Like Selena's like, so her character is super into Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew. And yeah, so it was very fun. And not only did we get amazing locations because it was COVID, but we also got amazing actors. So
oh my gosh, the whole supporting cast,
they were all Broadway because they didn't have jobs. There was no Broadway.
Yeah.
So it was like, okay, you want Jane Howdyshell, great. You want anyone from theater, they were available. So we got an amazing cast. And the DP cinematographer is also he lived next door to the building that we shot in.
Oh, cool.
Like for 10 years. So it was truly his neighborhood. And I had worked with him on Russian Doll, so I brought him to the show, and that was also just a love match. Like everyone loved him, and it was fun because I had done Russian Doll with him, where it was really a tribute to the East Village, which was really Natasha's experience. I felt like I basically told Natasha's story of New York, which is this gritty downtown girl, and then we got to tell the like loving Upper West Side story.
Yeah, it's cool. Like both of those shows have such personality, but very different New York, which is like one of the coolest parts of New York. Yeah. And speaking of when you're approaching a pilot, now that you have 2 pilots under your belt for Only Murders, you just established like there's great cast chemistry, the costume design, the set design, the tone, and just your camera movement. Like, I just watching through the seasons again, it was really fun to see how you're using almost like that circular dolly for the trio coming together when they're starting to investigate, or having them kind of in singles when they're lonely, and then you have them coming together. So can you talk about how, with direction, or with how you were blocking or planning your episode, how you wove the themes through the episode? Because you just feel it through the whole, it feels like a cohesive kind of wonderful thread through both seasons.
Yeah. I mean, definitely those were things I thought about. So like, what's the scene where they all kind of come together with their shared passion of true crime? Okay, let's circle them with the camera on that one. And then I was really influenced by like Edward Hopper and Rear Window and all those photographs of like people in windows being like alone. So that's sort of how the title sequence came about. And then the title sequence was also inspired by the way I was shooting the pilot. So I did a lot of shots outside the windows where I was going from one window to the next window to this window to that window. And then that inspired the artist who was doing the portrait that Mabel was painting on her wall, which was all windows. So that was something that we were just so many photographs of like cool New York portraits of people who are alone and then come together. Like, how can we visually tell that story? And all the window shots were actually green screen.
Wow.
So Jan playing the bassoon and all of that was actually done on the set. It's all fake and
Oh, it looked amazing. It did
yeah,
not,
it was, it was very well thought out, and we had a great visual effects team. But I always knew I wanted to do a lot of shots about windows, and actually every window in first season is a green screen. And it's all fake, and we did it all in post.
Wow. I mean, it's such a beautiful job, because you don't feel that at all. You feel like you're in the Arconia the whole time.
Yeah. So we worked hard on that. And the kind of like lyrical stuff in it was obviously in the script, and it was how to make the show a comedy, but then also have this like center of emotion. And I mean, luckily, I know that combination works gangbusters, because I had done it on But I'm a Cheerleader, which I also, a lot of people were like, how could you have these like sweet romantic scenes, but then also this like high comedy? And I'm like, you can do both. Like, that's my favorite, is to play with that tone. So when it's right, it's so good.
Yeah, for sure. It just really, you all do it beautifully in the show. And then I know you've worked with such amazing actors over your career on the, but particularly on Only Murders, you have these like comedy legends, Steve Martin and Martin Short, and then Selena Gomez, who's this like millennial icon. So how did you approach directing them, and how did their chemistry come together?
I mean, I was really lucky because Selena didn't know Marty and Steve, but she lives with her grandparents. So she was mostly raised by her grandparents, because she had like really young parents. And I had seen that in her cooking show, because I watched her cooking show before I worked with her, just to kind of get a vibe of what she was about. And her grandparents were all over the cooking show, and they were always in her kitchen. So I was like, oh, she's really comfortable with people who are in their 70s. And during COVID, she was like fully living with them when she was making the show. So that was perfect, because that's just like an age group that she's very comfortable with. I think also because they're not millennials, so they're not in the like billion fans that she has, and she's able to just feel comfortable and not like she has to be a superstar, which she is.
Right. Yeah.
And then they're also just very kind and care a lot about making sure she was comfortable. And I felt also, as a woman director, like I really wanted to make her feel comfortable, make her feel like she could give opinions on lines and make it her own, and really be like a true producer on the show and really add as much as she could. I had a funny thing though, because in I had the pilot, but then I also directed episode 2. And at the end of the pilot, she's this kind of intriguing character. And then basically at the end of the pilot, the finger points at her. So I needed to kind of keep her shadowy in the pilot so
Yeah.
that you would be like, holy Moses, she's the one who's like knew this guy and like there's something really crazy going on. And then episode 2 is really all about her.
Yeah.
So when I was directing the pilot, I was also directing episode 2 at the same time. So I had to be sure to remember to keep her kind of cagey, and you didn't really know who she was in the pilot, so
Mhm.
that you could point the finger at her at the end and it feel like maybe there was something really freaky going on. And then in episode 2, which I was shooting the same day as I was shooting the pilot, really kind of digging into who her character was and getting more of who she was, because that was sort of the episode explaining that she's in fact has this whole history with this murder and this person, and that it's she's not a killer, but she is involved a lot more than she ever said.
Yeah.
So it was a tricky balance, and I do think it's actually what I didn't have to do that on League of Their Own, where I was able to just do the pilot in itself, which
Right.
is a bit easier to do. It's harder to direct multiple episodes at the same time,
For sure.
which I had to do on Only Murders, and I'm actually doing right now in London. I'm directing 5 episodes at the same time and folded
wow.
into that is the pilot. That's really tough.
Yeah, that is tough. How do you kind of manage keeping track emotionally in where the story is?
It's really hard. Yeah. So I just
Yeah.
have to keep reading the scripts over and over again, and I have big flags on all the pilot scenes
Hmm.
so that I'm sure to always prioritize the pilot scenes.
Yeah, smart.
Because if you don't make the pilot right, it has to be perfect. If
Mhm.
it's not, no one's watching the show.
Yeah.
So yeah, so like even today I was scouting all day and the DP said, oh, the light is better, we should shoot this scene in the great light and the other scene can be the kind of okay light. And I was like, no, 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 no. That is episode 3. This one is the pilot. We shoot that in the perfect light.
Yeah, for sure.
You just have to like always. She's like, oh, but that's the big dialogue scene. I'm like, yeah, in episode 3, I don't care. Like, no, we have to make the big light for the pilot.
Yeah, exactly. So that's your 3rd pilot you're directing right currently?
Yeah.
That's very cool. And what do
Yeah.
you think now 3 pilots in, like that's a great example of something you've learned? Are there other things that you kind of bring to your director's toolkit now that perhaps you wouldn't have known yet with your first pilot?
I mean, I definitely think pilots have to be, especially the first 15 minutes is where people really decide if they want to watch it or not. And I know myself, I've turned off a lot of pilots in the first 15 minutes.
Yeah.
That, yeah, you just have to really get it right. And so prioritizing the first 15 minutes, not only the pilot, but also the first 15 minutes to suck people in. And obviously the casting has to be right. I mean, it's really tough with when you're not in COVID to get great people to do small parts.
Yeah.
But small parts with bad acting can totally throw you out of a show. So that's really hard. Directing is very athletic. There's so many ways you can fuck up. So you can have an actor who's not good enough. You can have the way the sun is in the day. You're shooting at the wrong time of day and the light looks terrible. You can just hire the wrong person for acting and they're just wrong for the part. They're a good actor, but they're wrong for the part.
Right.
If the script's not right and you don't catch it on the day, you're screwed. I mean, there's so many ways to mess things up. So it really is, I feel like a high wire act, getting something right. And the truth is I've directed for 20 years. I've directed so many scenes. Some terrible, some great, some no one will see, some a lot of people saw, some deeply flawed for a million reasons. But I definitely have learned in 20 years how to be better, and you don't always win, sometimes you try and you don't win. So I'm also used to like failing and just getting up and trying the next day, so.
Yeah.
And the good thing about filmmaking too is you can hide things in editing. You can hide things with a good music cue. You can hide things by not cutting to an actor and just cut to someone else.
Mhm.
You can change the script. There's a lot of ways you can hide things in post-production. So yeah, so I've just learned a lot in the 20 years. And honestly, the thing about directing is you get better the more you do it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And probably learn how to give yourself a break for things outside of
yeah,
your control, or yeah.
yeah, it's a high wire act. And I'm not the one, I mean, I am ultimately blamed for everything, but truly I can't do every job. I can try, but it's like at a certain point, I'm just going to do my best, and it's okay.
And then, so in the Alliance of Women Directors is made up of these hundreds of women and a lot who, want to move into episodic. Can you talk about, since you do have this great depth and breadth of experience in the industry, what you've seen change, and any advice to our members about navigating working in this industry, especially between features and episodic?
Yeah, I mean, I have never been picky about jobs that I have taken, and a lot of my contemporaries have been really picky, and they just don't work, and I have always, and I think this is also what I learned from when I worked with David Fincher, is he was directing battery commercials, and like he directed hundreds of shitty music videos, hundreds, like Rick Springfield, and like, yeah, he directed Madonna, but he also directed a lot of really shitty ones.
Yeah.
And you do get better by working. So just say yes to everything, I think.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I just have said yes to a lot of things. And other directors who started at Sundance would just be like, I want to do indie films, or I want to do pilots only, or I want to do really high end, whatever. And I was willing to take whatever shitty thing came across my plate and just
Yeah.
build from there. And then I made so many relationships working on, like, one of the first CW shows I worked on, and we never got any love, was Gilmore Girls.
Mm-hmm.
And 22 episodes a year. Amy Sherman Palladino is a brilliant writer. And I directed 18 episodes of that show. And I was like, there is no one more talented than Amy. She is so talented as a writer, director, force of nature. And I recognized that 20 years ago. So of all of the directors of Gilmore Girls, I'm the only director that also directed Marvelous Mrs. Maisel.
Yeah.
So also stay friends with people. Like if you see someone you work with on some CW show from 20 years ago, like keep them in your life. If they're awesome, they're awesome. Over time, people started recognizing that she's brilliant and Gilmore Girls was brilliant.
Yeah.
But at the time, it was like really sexist. We had no money, no budget, and it was like a lame network. But that show also has like aged really well over time, because it's like, yeah, she's brilliant, and she always was.
Yeah.
So I've also just like made friends along the way. And I think a lot of people are always like, I want to meet this person and they can help me, and this person can help me, and this person can help me. I'm like, look around you. It's the people around you. Like no one thought Amy was going to be like an Emmy winner, but
yeah.
I knew, because she was my friend and I could see how talented she was. So it's like, look around you and see where the talent is, and you guys rise up together, So I've always helped my friends, and I've always had like a posse of women that were really hardworking. I never thought, like another friend of mine, Nisha Ganatra, I've known her for 20 years, and she made an indie film same time as me. And I was like, but I'm a Cheerleader is great, but Chutney Popcorn is really fucking great. Like, you guys need to hire her. She could not get a job. 20 years she tried to get a job. 10 years she tried to get a job.
Yeah.
And no one would hire her for episodic TV. And then they actually had offered me a job as a producer director for Transparent, and I couldn't do it. And I said, you guys should hire Nisha, like my friend who is so talented, and the industry is just not giving her a break. And so Joey Soloway hired her, and she directed a bunch of Transparent and was a producer on the show in her first season. And then just like the popular gig, once she had done a bunch of episodes, her like career is on fire. So it's like, it's just, you got to be in it for the long game, and you have to just wait for your moment, because it is really annoying. But you know, I do think it's getting better. I think more women, they're giving more women breaks than they ever have before. And they're willing to like, okay, she's never directed a pilot before, but yeah, let's hire her. She's a lesbian. It's a lesbian story. Like maybe we should hire Jamie as a pilot director. So I do think they're starting to let the door open a little bit more, and it's just trying to keep yourself in there long enough for someone to give you the break, you know?
Yeah. For sure. It's great advice. So one other thing I wanted to just go back to about Only Murders in the Building, you had mentioned John's affection for magical realism. And it just reminded me of like one of my favorite sequences in the pilot where you have the Oliver kind of bouncing off the stairs at his son's house, and Mabel's ring, and Charles's omelet pan kind of going up and down. And it's really beautifully done. Can you talk about that and how you executed all those different pieces?
Yeah. So I had worked with a camera that shoots like 1,000 frames a second before.
Right.
And I had worked with it on a commercial. And so I knew that I could do that ring sequence by just using the camera that shoots 1,000 frames a second, where Mabel would basically just drop the ring and, you know, 1,000 frames. So you literally could see every single movement that it did. So that's how we shot the Mabel section on that camera. And then for Steve's thing where he had to drop the frying pan and then it bounced back up, I also shot that 1,000 frames a second, and Steve dropped the frying pan, and then I had special effects underneath, push the frying pan up a piece of the floor. Basically, the special effects guy was under the floor, and so when the frying pan hit the floor, the special effects guy pushed it back up.
Oh, really cool. Yeah.
So basically just had like a little thing. It had a magnet, so it landed on the magnet, and then it pushed it back up. And then we just took out in visual effects, we just took the pipe out that was pushing it back up for him to grab it. So that's how we did that. And then the third one was Marty. He was falling off of a staircase. I couldn't find a location that had a staircase, so I ended up having to build that little front thing on his house so that he could fall off of it. And basically I had Marty fall out of the frame, and then I had a double bounce back into the frame. And I said to Marty, if you want to do the fall yourself, that would be fine. And he was like, I do not want to do that.
Yeah. He's like, no,
I'm 70, I do not want to do that. So, and so yeah, I used a body double for him. And by the way, I also used a body double for Steve for the finale when he was on the ground, like vibrating around.
Yeah. Oh, funny.
That is a body double.
That's funny.
Yeah, Steve did one take.
Yeah.
And he was great. And he's like, I'm 72 or whatever.
Yeah,
he
he's
is.
like, come on.
He was like, I'm in a lot of pain. I can't do that again. And I was like, no problem. And so we had a double stunt man who had the wig and looks exactly like Steve, and he did all of that stuff.
Oh, it's so good. Yeah, you couldn't tell any of that. Oh my God, I love how you had Jane Lynch come in as Steve's
Baz.
Yeah.
He's so funny. So I had worked with her on Popular, so I worked with her like years ago, and then just like Lesbian Mafia. So I've known her for years, and she's a ringer. She's like, you bring her to ring,
so
and
good. Yeah, just she's so good.
She's
even
so
Amy Ryan.
I directed the second season finale, and it's so fun.
I know, I'm so I was dying because I was like, no, I forgot that
really
season 2 is still
really good. Yeah,
I can't.
I highly recommend the second season finale. It's very, very good, and it makes it really exciting for third season.
Oh, cool. They're all so great. I mean, it's so beautifully done. And all right. And so we are almost out of time. So in honor of the Emmys, if you're game for it, we'd love to do a lightning round of 3
Great.
questions. Okay. What was your favorite childhood TV show?
Laverne and Shirley.
Oh, I love Laverne and Shirley. Oh, that's kind of cool. You did the League of Their Own, and that's such a nice Penny Marshall homage. Oh, that's cool. I love that. What was your favorite moment from either the pilot episode that you're nominated for, or any of the episodes of Only Murders that you've directed?
Favorite moment or favorite scene or like favorite?
Yeah, favorite scene, maybe your favorite scene, and then the other question is your favorite behind the scenes moment. So
My favorite scene that I directed was the finale of season 2 reveal party, where it is revealed who the murderer was of Bunny. A very fun scene. So I shot it over 5 days. It was one scene that I got to shoot in 5 days. It was so fun. I loved it. And my favorite on-set memory is probably the very last day of filming season 1. We all went outside and we decided we wanted to take a cast and crew photo. And so we all took our masks off. At that time during COVID, it was before the vaccines. So I was wearing 2 masks because I did not want to kill Steve or Marty or Selena. I had 2 masks and a head shield. So I wore like a full head shield, like a welder's mask, and 2 masks. So we went outside and I took off my mask and I took off my welder's shield and we got to take a picture together. And Steve looked at me and he said, "I don't recognize you."
He's like, who are you without the welder's mask?
Only knew me as this. This was me.
Yeah. He's like it is funny.
Like, I love you and I just know your eyes, but that's all I know. I've never seen anything else. It was so funny.
That's hilarious.
So yeah, it was great to work on the second season because I actually got to like show my face.
Yeah, it was probably such a nice shift from the season 1 shooting conditions.
Yeah.
Well, great. Well, is there anything else you want to say about Only Murders or
I had so much fun. It was such a lovely, wonderful experience. So I'm happy that we've gotten a lot of love for the show.
Oh my gosh, it's amazing. It's a wonderful show, and we are like crossing our fingers and rooting for the show with all the 17 nominations, which is a testament to just how beautifully done the show is. So thank you so much.
Thanks for being a great moderator.
Oh, thanks so much. It was lovely to talk to you, and everybody can catch season 1 and 2 of Only Murders in the Building on Hulu and watch the Emmys. The show is September 12th on ABC. To learn more about the Alliance of Women Directors and to support our membership, please go to theallianceofwomendirectors.org, and you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter and Instagram at AWD_directors. And thanks so much for watching.